Israeli Prime Minister Bennett is calling his meeting with President Biden a success. The meeting took place under the shadow of the U.S. pullout from Afghanistan and terror attacks there. Here's what Bennett and Biden had to say about Israel's greatest threat, Iran. Before boarding his flight home, Bennett described the time with President Biden as a direct and personal connection based on trust.
We achieved all of the objectives for the trip, and even beyond that. We agreed with the Americans on a joint strategic effort to halt the Iranian nuclear race. We have taken a significant step in equipping and building Israeli power.
While the two leaders differ in approach, they agree Iran must never get a nuclear weapon.
We're putting diplomacy first and seeing where that takes us. But if diplomacy fails, we're ready to turn to other options.
These very days illustrate what the world would look like if a radical Islamic regime acquired a nuclear weapon. That marriage would be a nuclear nightmare for the entire world. Iran is the world's #1 exporter of terror, instability, and human rights violations.
Bennett highlighted Israel's strategy.
First goal is to stop Iran on its regional aggression and start rolling him back into the box. And the second is to permanently keep Iran away from ever being able to break out the nuclear weapon.
CBN's Gary Lane spoke with Israel's former ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, about how the U.S. pullout from Afghanistan is changing the dynamics in the region, strengthening radicals in Lebanon, Gaza, and Iran.
Ambassador Danon, it's good to talk with you again. So, an emboldened Taliban now in control in Afghanistan. What does that mean for Israel?
For us, when the U.S. is strong, Israel is strong. And when the perception is that the U.S. is getting weaker, we are weaker. Those pictures that we saw coming from Kabul are actually giving more strength to the radicals in Lebanon, to the radicals in Gaza, and to the radicals in Tehran. And I think the question is whether the new administration will now continue to negotiate with Tehran and will try to re-enter the agreement with Iran all over again.
And many other Islamic terrorist groups see that the most powerful military in the world was defeated and embarrassed by the enemy they fought against for 20 years. The Taliban's now in control. So how about the terrorist group on Israel's northern border? Let's talk about Hezbollah first. Do you expect them to make a move, or are they too weak financially and politically to attack Israel right now?
The issue is the perception of strength and power. You know, I served as Deputy Minister of Defense, and I learned that it's not about the real strength you have, about the number of tanks or submarines. It's about the perception. And I think today the perception that the U.S. is weaker, and those people sitting in Beirut, the heads of Hezbollah, they know that we will retaliate, we will attack them, and I think they know it very seriously, so they will think twice before challenging the IDF. And also politically, they know that the people in Lebanon will blame them for the consequences. So I don't know what will happen, and also you have to understand that the people in Hezbollah in Beirut don't decide. They get orders from Tehran. So the radicals in Tehran will decide when the next conflict will be here in the north.
Well, that's the big concern, is it not? What Iran is going to do. And I know your Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, recently met with President Biden at the White House. And Biden said he will not allow Iran to possess a nuclear weapon on his watch. But how can Israel trust his word on that, given that many of America's allies feel abandoned? They feel let down by the hasty withdrawal from Afghanistan. Can you depend on his word?
We have to trust ourselves. History has taught us that we have to be the ones securing our future and our well-being. And I think we have a reason to worry, because the new administration actually acknowledged that they are willing, they are eager to sign a deal with the administration in Tehran. I don't know why, but now the only reason that we don't have agreement is because the leadership in Tehran are not willing to negotiate with the U.S. I hope it will stay that situation, because the last thing we want is another bad agreement that will allow Iran to become nuclear, allow them to send their proxies weapons and funding. we don't want to see it becoming a reality.
Many Americans believe Israel may be forced to act alone against Iranian nuclear weapons. Prime Minister Bennett suggested that Israel will take steps against the Islamic Republic a little bit at a time. So how could you stop them without U.S. military backing and support? Don't you need that?
We have the capability to defend ourselves, and if we will have no choice, we will do it ourselves. We did it in the past. I want to remind you when we destroyed the nuclear reactor in Iraq, the nuclear reactor in Syria. We hope it will not be the case that it will be only Israel against the radicals of Iran. But if nothing will stop them, we will be there to stop them.
Alpha.